Finally, welcome back to the Nook. I haven't uploaded a video in I think 2 or 3 weeks now, and yeah, it's been a pretty long time. Not gonna go too deep into the details why I haven't been uploading. But yeah, I'm back, and I'm gonna be talking about a topic that I have kind of been talking a lot about on this channel, but I wanted to sort of make it a bit more relevant and to kind of throw in a lot of things that I've been learning. Just, I guess, a disclaimer or a caution. This video is gonna be kind of loosely tied together. I just really wanted to push it out there because I just felt the ideas or the thoughts coming out of my head. And to be really honest, no one in my actual life really wants to give me the time of the day to listen to all this. So thank you for listening to this. If you are intending on listening to the whole thing, really grateful that there are random people on the internet who are willing to listen to me talk about these issues. So I've got my favorite shirt on, trying to soothe myself a little bit before I start talking about pretty serious topics in this video. So let's just start. This video is going to be talking about climate anxiety. No big news right there. You probably have seen a lot of headings around, hitting headlines about young people being extraordinarily stressed out about the climate crisis. You probably saw a lot of things about how, startling numbers about how, there's just a lot of people across all different countries who are really, really, really affected psychologically by the potential impacts that they might face in the future. Now, I'm glad that all these studies are coming out, and at the same time, it is kind of validating to my own experience because I kind of do feel this existential dread a lot. This has been a common underlying thread across all the conversations that I would have with friends. Generally, there's a greater understanding that many people are concerned, and especially younger people are much more concerned because things are accelerating at a pace that they might not be able to control, because this demographic, people below the ages of 35, are usually not in positions of power. So that, coupled with the fact that we might see even worse effects in the future, kind of combine into this really tight spot where you can't even enjoy your youth because all your time and effort and energy is being spent on worrying on something that you can't even control. And there's been a lot of talk about climate anxiety. A lot of people are using this word a lot, like eco-anxiety, climate grief. There's this word, solastalgia. Did I pronounce it right? It's about kind of the preemptive concern over environmental degradation. So there are all these terms that are coming out, and I would say current therapy models are not really able to cope with all these changes. I would say even now, even the modern ills of anxiety and depression, these things are still not adequately treated or kind of dealt with or sort of embraced and accepted in conventional therapy models or mental health models. Having queer identities, having any sort of maybe racially informed therapy, those are still pretty rare. I mean, considering that we've been dealing with all these issues for a much longer time than we have been dealing with the emergence of this climate crisis consciousness. So I would say it's going to take quite a long time for public health discourse to really catch up with this level of psychological distress. I just want to put it out there because this is pretty real, and it is kind of really upsetting when your psychological reality is not being reflected in the real world around you. So things like maybe your family, your friends, or even just general news outlets or even mass media, they don't seem to capture what's really going on in your mind, or I guess the kind of anxieties that you would have about the future, and so forth. So I just want to put it out there, I guess, that this is what I see right now, that there's this huge gap in understanding between generations, and I guess in general, the level of psychological distress that is happening right now and will come in the future alongside very real environmental disasters, things like having much more heat waves, floods. So our material world is going to be a lot more disrupted, but so is our psychological, our mental and emotional frameworks that have been pretty much held steady somewhat, but it's going to be undone a lot faster as well. I was scrolling this Reddit thread on the climate. So I've been scrolling a lot of climate threads and collapse threads. It's not really very healthy, but I've been on those threads, and there was this one post that talked about, if you're below 40, chances are you're gonna experience way worse climate events than your grandparents ever did. And everyone knows that this is kind of the fact, the truth, but the numbers were pretty straightforward. It was like numbers such as children today will experience 3 times the amount of kind of like climate events in their lifetime as compared to people, their grandparents who were born pretty much in the 1960s-ish era. And so this puts into perspective that obviously there is a pretty substantial difference, and it's uneven across countries. So in a lot of countries in the global south, they will be kind of suffering most of the damage actually, because that's where a lot of the climate events are going to be happening in terms of the in terms of the climate. I mean, what am I saying? I mean, in terms of geography as well. So it's really frustrating to think about all this when we pretty much know that people in the global north aren't gonna really consider this a very prominent or kind of immediate threat. Me being based in Singapore, obviously there isn't a lot of panic about the climate crisis, simply because there's always this very strong narrative that we are in a very safe geographical zone, that the countries around us are going to protect us from natural disasters, and that our economic system is so strong and so so resilient, etc., etc. Our infrastructure is top notch. So there's a really strong narrative that countries like Singapore would be protected from the climate crisis. But as we all know, the climate crisis does not discriminate, based off like who is where. Obviously, I mean, it's going to be unevenly affecting people, but in terms of natural disasters, you can't fully predict which zones are going to be safe forever. I mean, that's just kind of the reality of it. And I just want to talk a little bit more about this cognitive dissonance, right? And seeing all this news, not just the IPCC, but just generally like so many things, like people are posting all about their experiences having this direct, contact with climate disasters that will potentially get worse. You have fires that are followed by floods, with a very short window of time in between for recovery. And people are posting all these things on social media, right? People are kind of sharing their experiences. People are kind of speaking up about it. And a huge cognitive dissonance is when all these things are happening, but people are so insistent on keeping things as the status quo, or people are so insistent on going back to the normal. And the normal is a huge term that I would say has been completely disrupted and remolded and sort of thrown out in so many different ways. Like the new normal usually refers to kind of going back to the prioritization of economic growth, kind of encouraging people to spend, going back to jobs that don't pay you so well, going back to this sort of very work-obsessed society, going back to a very ableist society, one that is discriminatory across all levels, going back to that normal, going back to the idea that like it's okay for the rich to get richer and for all our jobs to kind of put us at a compromise in terms of our health, in terms of our future safety, etc. And there's a really good video that this YouTube channel, The Liberal Cook, made about the normal, about this idea of having to go back to the normal. And it's also bringing about the question of what does the normal mean and who does it benefit? This is not something I can really give you a full answer to, but in every society, going back to the normal doesn't always mean it's a good thing for everyone. And that, having this whole situation of like having to work from home and having all these restrictions on travel, it has really shown the inequalities across society a lot more. You see that the people whose jobs and occupations were the most at risk and compromised are usually the ones that are paid much less. These are the people who usually have a lot less welfare benefits, or are in much more of a precarious situation with regards to their work, in terms of their health, the gig economy especially. And the people who benefit the most are people who are, already sort of privileged in a particular way. Maybe they have very cushy corporate jobs, but at the same time they may not be kind of immune to the whole work obsessive culture that we have. But that's not to say that, it is definitely a lot easier for some people to have all these restrictions and lockdowns than it is for other people whose work and their lives literally depend on them being able to fulfill their jobs outside, and all that. And so this cognitive dissonance, I think, plays a lot. They're all kind of intersecting, right? So we see this environmental degradation, we see this huge inequality that's being shown by the pandemic, and we see we just generally see this huge gap between, why are we trying to go back to normal and to do things as per status quo when there are all these problems that are staring us in the face. And that's the thing that kind of played into why I became so disillusioned with work in the first place, because I was reading as well David Graeber's book on BS jobs. And it's true, what is the value that we're creating in this world? So just the other day I was reading this book called The Growth Delusion, The Wealth and Well-Being of the Nation by David Pilling, and I don't think this is anything that's particularly mind-blowing, but it is about the idea of growth and how obsessed we are with growth. And I know a lot of you wanted me to kind of go deeper into the idea of growth, into the idea of degrowth specifically, which this book doesn't talk about, but it does question a lot about GDP, about how we measure value, and I'm still learning a lot about degrowth, which I will hopefully make a much more coherent and in-depth video about. But in this video I just want to really briefly comment on the idea of value creation and how we see that all these things that we're doing in our day-to-day life, what does it actually do? We see problems, yes, unfair justice systems. We see huge income inequalities. We see huge wealth gaps across countries. We see a really subpar response to public health crisis. We see a failure of a lot of things. But in the end, there is a common kind of pressure to go back to how things have been, which obviously have not been very helpful for a majority of us, going back to work and crunching numbers to produce even more profits. For what end? Does it help the environment? Does it help to recover the environment? Does it help people to mitigate any sort of environmental risk that they face? Does it help people with their mental health? Does it help sort of ease the maybe food insecure households in your area? Oftentimes it's really hard to make a link like that if you're working a job that maybe is in a much bigger corporation, or maybe you're working in the civil service where things are a lot more delegated and it's just a matter of who gets to write out the politically correct answer to the public. So I feel like because of this, all of these factor into why there's so many people who are starting to buy into this anti-capitalist and sort of I wouldn't even dare say anti-work, but rather sort of questioning the meaning of work in itself in society today, and this really huge contradiction where you are forced to work in order to earn a living to live, but that your living situations are just going to get worse, and whatever you do at your work, instead of allowing you to be able to live life in the best way possible in your present, is preparing you, I guess, in some ways, for a cushy future that is not even guaranteed. So I feel like there's kind of a dilemma unless you're able to find a job that really pays you very well for a very minimal amount of effort, that doesn't really necessarily exploit people but contributes meaning to the world. It's great if you have a job like that, great for you, but I would say for a lot of us, it's really hard to find a job that has a very direct contribution to the world's problems while at the same time paying you a salary that's good enough for you to survive in this world, but not just survive, but to thrive in this world. And I don't want to be too much of a like party pooper. I'm just sort of expressing or articulating what I feel is the current state of sentiments, and how this whole cultural move towards a climate crisis consciousness intersects with how we start to think about, you know, our work and what we think is our purpose in life on this earth. Because the fact is, being someone who is in their early 20s, I really just want to let go of the idea of a career, right? Because what's the point of working hard at a career that gives me a lot of money if, you know, in 10 years time I might not even have, you know, like maybe a park to go to. I might not even have roads that are safe enough to walk on. I may not even have drinkable water at that time. And of course, I'm just speculating, but these are all concerns that I feel on a very regular occurrence. And I don't know whether anyone else feels this. I know that for me, being in a very sort of affluent country, I feel like the effects are not going to be as pertinent until a much later time. But even then, I do know that, you know, these changes are going to happen. So because of this whole background, I kind of start to feel like, you know, what is the best course of action for me to take now? What's the best use of who I am today now to sort of do something about things that I see? Because I don't really have a lot of other ways I can channel that avenue in my real world. I tried to really seek that out through sort of formal employment options, but I feel really much at a dead end when it comes to that because of my age as well as the general working world here. So what do we do now? We have this cognitive dissonance. We don't seem to see the world kind of shifting anytime soon. Just the other day I came home and I sort of expressed that I have this major existential crisis that's going on right now, and people were actually concerned about me. They kind of thought that I was going crazy, and I think maybe I am. I don't know, maybe we all are, but we're still here. I mean, I'm still here, physically present, in my material self in front of you in an immaterial way, and I'm still here. So the next question is, you know, what do we do with all this kind of understanding? What do we do with the fact that we start to know all these things and we just simply have no way of kind of mitigating things? The number one thing that people normally recommend for you with regards to the climate crisis is to use your political power. I agree. I do think that political power is something that is pretty powerful in a lot of places. But the reality is that a lot of us are stuck in systems where young people don't really have a lot of political voice. We don't really have a very strong political presence in a lot of the societies that we inhabit today. So for example, like me, I really don't expect, you know, my representatives to really understand this whole situation. And it's kind of unfortunate that we're in this position. This kind of learned helplessness as well. I would say, you know, it's harder and harder to find governments and authorities that can really accurately capture the anxieties of the people today. So if you're in a place where your authorities can do that for you, that's amazing, that's great. I hope we can have more models of that in the future. But really, realistically, a lot of us are in positions where our political power is, you know, very much maybe not really there, or maybe not really the most effective way or fastest way to get things done, which is really unfortunate, I do think, because that's kind of really saddening. I think it's pretty worth to be sad about that. And so moving on, what can we do, right? The second recommendation that people make is to make use of your position as a consumer. And this goes out specifically to, not really specifically, but it goes out especially to people who are in much more affluent countries. So if you're in Singapore, you're Singaporean, you're watching this applies to you as well. This is really for people who have been, you know, kind of raised or kind of have been living in affluent countries where consumerism is the pretty much the main doctrine that we all live by. So things like buying more things to prove your status to other people, buying more things as sort of a equivalent of a well lived like well-being or like a good life, having more stuff, sort of surrounding your habits and your hobbies around buying stuff, accumulating things, having the idea of disposable income. That is all part of a consumerist society, which I'm pretty much a part of as well, and I struggle a lot with this in terms of like me trying to cut back on my spending as much as possible, trying to understand what really are my needs and my wants. And this goes back to basic home economics. If you feel like you're not really questioning yourself a lot, maybe you're still buying a lot of fast fashion, maybe you're still eating a lot of meat, maybe you're sort of still shopping a lot on those sales, buying a lot of unnecessary things, maybe it's time to really consider that. And again, I would say, yes, I don't think personal responsibility is the end all. Definitely not. I watched this video by Lena Norms the other day that talked about climate anxiety. It's part of a series talking about, things that she wished she had known when she was in her 20s, and this episode in particular was really great because it talked about climate anxiety and the things that she wished she would have known a little bit better. And this whole personal responsibility narrative is one big part as well in that video, and I really resonated with that because nowadays it's pretty common for people to negate the whole personal responsibility thing, and it's true that most of the kind of major decision-making powers are still with the top 100 corporations that emit, the majority of carbon emissions. But at the same time, people are the consumers who then, buy into this demand-supply narrative, right? It's because, maybe the consumers themselves have also been co-opted into this whole complicated mess of transactions without really questioning what the value of those transactions are, without questioning what are the costs of those transactions. In case you didn't know, a lot of snacks that you buy, the kind of oil that goes into them is palm oil, which you probably know has its own history and background of sustainability not being very sustainable, etc., etc. Your plastics, they're all from oil as well. They're all from petrochemicals and all that. In case you didn't know, pretty much almost everything that you touch will have some kind of man-made material that has come from this sort of mass manufacturing of man-made materials. Yeah, so deforestation, mining, all these things, not just that, even agricultural sector plays a big part, and that is driven by consumer wants as well. Of course, it's heavily subsidized, but at the same time, because of the kind of cultural value that we tie to the meat and dairy industry, a lot of our other sectors are affected by that kind of big block that agriculture takes up. So I know, I kind of feel like if you can do something about it, why not? I feel like at least it's a practice, an exercise of your own personal agency in this world that seems to strip you away of almost everything that you can do for yourself. So just do yourself a favor and read up on things that you can do right now, in terms of not just doing the actual thing and maybe not producing the effect. Of course, your effect may not be a lot, but I do think that it's a cultural shift towards ideas of degrowth, towards ideas of frugal abundance. These are all mindset shifts, and so mindset shifts are really powerful, not just the actual outcome that you produce, but imagine a whole society moving towards that kind of mindset. I kind of can imagine that it would be a pretty powerful shift to move towards much more sustainable, much more eco-conscious, much more mutual and ecological way of being in the world. That starts from getting rid of that consumerist in your mind, getting rid of that kind of capitalistic doctrine that we've been taught to grow up with. And all these are just huge personal shifts that will accumulate into a larger collective shift towards things that are a lot more sustainable and I guess enjoyable for all people. Again, all these things are tied together. Having a much more ethical and sustainable world is not just great for the environment, it's also great for people. So I see it as a win-win. I don't know. For my very last bit of this whole video, I thought it was going to be a short video, but here I am again, running over time as usual. I just wanted to share this figure that's made by Sarah Jaquette, who wrote a book about climate anxiety, how to manage it, etc. And this figure has been really helpful in understanding the whole, arc of going through climate anxiety and how to really emerge from that. It's not wrong to have climate anxiety. I think it's a very, very, very valid response to the things that are happening around in our world today. So if people are telling you that you're crazy for thinking that the world is going to end, you're not crazy. They are the ones who are crazy, so don't worry about that. Anyway, this figure talks about the whole journey, which is starting from idealism. So this is kind of like believing that the world is so beautiful, having this childlike wonderment of things. Kind of maybe you were a bug obsessed little kid, and then losing that in a sense, realizing that the world is a lot more worse off than it actually is, and understanding that people were the ones that caused it, like humans were the ones that caused all this damage and all this destruction. And then there's guilt, right? Every single thing becomes an act of shame. I've been through that. I would literally feel really sick if I had like a piece of meat that was snuck into my meal. And then there's nihilism, which I also kind of cycle through again sometimes. The idea that your life is just not worth living anymore, that there's no need to do anything, that we can just just F off and just have a good time, play some music and just enjoy life, which is a very understandable response. But if you're just stuck there, it's going to make things worse instead of making them better. Moving on, then you start to do all these small acts of self-love and self-soothing, understanding again and rebuilding up your understanding of what it means to be a sane and safe and healthy person. And I think this is really crucial, the idea that it's a rediscovery of yourself, understanding who you are outside of this consumerist framework, outside of this growth mindset, understanding who you are at the very very baseline, like knowing that you are someone with hobbies, someone with interests, someone with traits that the system cannot take away from you, that the school or the society, they can't take those traits away from you. So this whole stage is about rediscovering who you are, I guess, before schooling took over, before society sort of dictated who you should be. And this is actually a really, really how do I say this? Really liberating process, I would say. I mean, of course, I'm still going through that, and I slip back into the whole guilt and nihilistic state a lot. But I have started to find and understand why is it that activists intend to really promote love at the center of everything, because you don't want to paint a bleak picture for people to look forward to. You really want to paint a picture where people can be themselves and to live in harmony with everyone else and every other living being on this planet. And you really want to focus on that image. You really want to focus on that idea that this is about you. It's not just about the planet. It's not just about the people around you. It's not just about the environment. It's not just about the animals that you find very cuddly and cute. It's about you, the fact that you get to live your most true self in this planet, and the planet can help you do that. And the earth, am I saying the earth is the planet, but everyone else can help you do that, and you can help everyone else do that. And I think that's such a liberating sort of mindset to have at this stage. And moving on, that's the hope and efficacy kind of stage where you start to seek out solutions, micro solutions, wherever you are. You start to implement actions. You start to really see a much more positive light. And that whole process hopefully will result in resilience. And I think resilience is such a wonderful concept to hold on to. I remember I once attended a talk by an academic back in school, back on campus in my uni days, and this academic was talking about the idea of queer resilience. So what does that mean? And that means to craft and to constantly craft your own narrative, your own life, to be able to find a life worth living on the fringes of society. Not really fringes, but to be able to write your own life in a society that doesn't normally have a strict path for you. So if you're like a a usual straight, I guess it's really easy to know what to do next. So like having a partner and getting married and having children and having that whole lifestyle is pretty much is accessible to you because it's on media, it's everywhere, people just tell it to you, that you know, it's just so easy. Like your grandparents probably told you how to be a straight person, but to be a queer person, the resilience comes from constantly having to negotiate intimacy, your identity, in a society that is constantly challenging it. So I find this concept to be really a very beautiful concept that is, you know, equal parts painful, but also equal parts like beautiful in a very vulnerable way, and that's something that I always hold on to, that notion of queer resilience, every time I think about having to, you know, navigate my way in life in this society. And I think that's a really useful idea to have, especially when it comes to talking about resilience in the face of the climate crisis. And that's why I really love, you know, intersecting all these ideas together, because we all know that, you know, main structures, like, you know, very dominant structures always need to be altered to be much more inclusive for everyone. So take it as it is, take it as an opportunity to really start to seek your own agency in the things around you, or at least that's how I see it in my point of view. Obviously, I am not at the end goal. I really don't know what I can do other than to make videos about this whole topic on YouTube, but that is just my one first small step in hopefully being able to do much more about this whole topic from where I am. And I do hope that if you're watching this, that maybe there are some areas that you can do for yourself and the people around you with regards to the whole situation. And I just wanted to put this out there that, you know, under the hope and efficacy thing, what has been really helpful for me is understanding this idea of solar punk and degrowth. So I'm still doing my own research into those areas, trying to understand what it means to imagine a better future, what it would be like to imagine systems that are, you know, fairer, happier, healthier in all ways, but obviously having grown up in this society, in this education system, it is impossibly difficult, not impossibly difficult, I mean, it's incredibly difficult for me to imagine things, just at the very baseline. It's very hard for me to imagine that things, especially things regarding authority, can actually change and shift, because I've never really seen that in my own lifetime. So, you know, it's all a work in progress. But yes, I do hope this whole video was sort of helpful. I don't know, because it just all came out of my mouth like this. I don't know how coherent it'll sound. Hopefully after some editing it will make some sense. But if you watched all the way till the end, thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for waiting for my videos. If you have waited, you know, making videos, I realize, have given me a lot of comfort in that I can articulate my thoughts in a way that, you know, I wouldn't be able to in my day-to-day, because again, who's gonna believe a young person like me spouting all the sorts of things about the climate? And I just kind of hope that I can go deeper into these topics again and again over, you know, the course of how long this channel will run. Of course, I'm still going to go back to book-related content once in a while, and I hope you all have been able to join the Climathon Readathon this month, actually. Reading is really one of the best ways to start to unlearn a lot of things. And in order to learn and to make space for new things, you have to kind of unpack and question some of the things that you've been taught to believe in ever since you grew up. Of course, not saying that everything is wrong, not saying that, you know, it's time to rebel against everything. No, I just hope that realistically we can move forward in a way that treats everyone nicely. I think that's the end of my message, honestly. I think that all these systems of exploitation and oppression are all overlapping, having exploitation of people across race, gender, across countries, is kind of, you know, intersecting with the exploitation of nature, and thinking that humans are superior to nature and therefore kind of perpetuating superiority complexes within the human race itself. Yeah, and you know, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Being human, we're just human, you know. Like, the world is so much bigger than us, and nature is so amazing, and nature is so resilient, and that's what we have to learn, right? We have to learn how to be resilient from Mother Nature and to really pay tribute to that. And that's what I feel, and that's really all very much prominent in a lot of indigenous knowledge and wisdoms and beliefs and religions. So yes, yeah. Anyway, again, that was such a long ramble. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed whatever I talked about. If you have any thoughts about whatever I just discussed, do share your thoughts down below. I try my best to kind of weave together ideas about the climate and work, because a lot of you are here because of my work videos as well as my kind of degrowth videos. So I wanted to tie those things together a bit more in this one. So thanks so much, and I hope I'll be able to get back to more videos this coming month, because I'm finally able to find much more time to do these things. And I'm just really happy to be back on the platform. So yeah, cool. And yeah, I will work on my streaming schedule. Not sure how I'm gonna do that. The software is kind of a nightmare to use, but I'll try not to be a tech dinosaur here. But yes, thanks so much. I hope you're having a good day. If not, I hope you have a good night's rest. You deserve it. I hope that tomorrow will be a much better day for you. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Take care. Please take care. Please, please.